Early on in my marriage, I attended a women's retreat where the speaker spoke on submission. And to illustrate her point, she shared a story of a pregnant woman whose husband wanted her to have an abortion. Despite the woman's misgivings, she submitted to her husband. And the speaker happily reported that on the way to the procedure, the woman had a spontaneous miscarriage. See, the speaker said, God was faithful. I wanted to stand up and shout, don't believe such simplistic teaching about submission. But I didn't. I stayed glued to my seat. Why? Because I feared the disapproval of the group. I was afraid that the other women in the organization would think I was a feminist, a liberal Christian. Now, in another example, my husband and I went to dinner with a couple we enjoyed socially. And since the restaurant was about an hour away, the man said he would drive. However, during dinner, the man consumed at least 3 cocktails. And my husband and I looked at one another and whispered, what are we going to do? We didn't want to offend our friends, and he didn't seem obviously drunk, but he did drink 3 cocktails. We didn't want to risk orphaning our 2 children who were back home with the babysitter. But neither one of us said a word as we sat stone-faced and terrified in the back seat while he drove home. Thankfully, we arrived safely. But what if we hadn't? What if someone had gotten hurt or killed because we were more worried about what our friend would think than everyone else's safety? In each of these incidents, I lacked the courage to speak up and do what was right. The Bible warns us that the fear of man is a snare. When you or I are controlled by fear, we can't love well. Therefore, I want to share with you 3 things that you can do to begin to conquer your fear of people. I want you to learn to live for God's approval rather than man's approval or woman's approval, and perhaps in the process save you or a friend from having to live with lifelong negative consequences. So first, anchor yourself in God's love rather than other people's love. The Bible tells us that perfect love casts out that fear. And so when you bend into other people, you're controlled by their opinions and their approval rather than God's. And that not only hurts you, it may very well hurt them. But when you're confident of God's love for you, it empowers you to love others well without being held captive by your fear of their disapproval. Second, learn to tolerate another person's disapproval or their disagreement or their differences than you. If you're unable to tolerate these emotions, then you'll always go along with the group. In addition, you won't grow into the person God created you to be if you're always worried about what other people think. Now, no one likes people to be upset or angry with them, but there are times you need to do what God tells you to do rather than cave into the approval or the pressure of the group. Third, ask God for the courage to do the right thing, to stand apart from the group when you need to. That doesn't mean you won't feel fearful. Courage isn't the absence of fear, rather it's the power to be present to your fear and still do the right thing. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a young Lutheran pastor who was martyred during Hitler's regime, said this: silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. I hope that you will learn to stand with me and others and determine that you will no longer live for the approval of your peers or your friends, but for God's approval. And that might mean speaking up or even standing up when you see someone potentially hurting themselves or hurting someone else, even if it means the disapproval of the group.